All right, so welcome everyone. Today we're here to talk about liquid staking, kind of the past, where we are now, and how we'll develop in the future. Just as a quick raise of hands, who here has used any sort of liquid staking product in the past? All right, all right. So, maybe 40% of the room, which is great. Hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll feel a little bit better about trying it out. But it's definitely probably the most popular, in fact, it is the most popular way today to access the staking ecosystem. So quickly, I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. My name is Madison. I'm head of growth for SSV Network. We are staking infrastructure that dramatically reduces the downside risk of slashing and increase attestation rates. We just make it safer to stake on Ethereum. So now let's just go right down and have you guys talk a little bit about yourselves.
I'm Matt Leisinger. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alluvial. We're building an institutional liquid staking standard so that we have a higher bar for liquid staking.
Hey everybody, Dan Reeser. I lead the growth team at Akala. We're a DeFi-focused parachain built on Polkadot, all centered around a stablecoin called AUSD. But as part of our blockchain, we've built in a decentralized exchange to help facilitate liquidations for our stablecoin. And then, of course, on the topic of this panel, we have a liquid staking product called LDOT. The reason why we built that is because it helps unlock liquidity of staked DOT in order to mint stablecoins using LDOT. So that's me.
I'm Clayton, head of protocol at Figment. So we're a staking infrastructure provider. We run validators on over 60 different proof-of-stake networks with a focus on creating an institutional offering for larger holders, whether it be crypto-native VCs, exchanges, custodians, wallet providers, or more traditional asset managers entering the space.
Awesome. So around 1/3 of all the staked Ether is done through effectively a liquid staking product. Why do you all think that liquid staking in particular has drawn so much attention from the marketplace and has been the go-to solution for stakers?
Yeah, I think you've seen a ton of adoption over the last 18 months. I think it's grown 35x, huge growth. And I think mainly on Ethereum, obviously, there's the lockup right now. So people want liquidity for their staked assets, and we're seeing that. And there are protocols out there, and Lido's done a great job of innovating in the space. But I think, with that, you've seen concerns for, having too much of the network. So I think that with that, they're doing a great job along with, client diversity and things like that. I think that over time, though, it's going to be important that we see competition in this space.
I mean, it's also just the value proposition for having the liquid representation of the asset is just so strong, especially when you're looking at more institutional people entering the space, but also from a me or you token holder perspective, especially like what we've seen happen in the past 2 months with the market. A lot of that value is locked, and you just can't do anything with it. There's obviously concerns, but just given that value proposition, it's inevitable that's going to happen. So I think what we need to do is ensure that the solutions that we're creating are going to be valuable and secure.
Yeah, and then I can talk more specifically to the Polkadot ecosystem because that's kind of where I've spent the last few years. And part of it's also improving the user experience. So Polkadot, for example, has a 28-day unbonding period. So going from a 28-day unbonding period to a liquid staking product with instant unbonding is a game changer for retail users as well as institutions who are using liquid staking products. And then the other piece, of course, is just capital efficiency. So if you're staking DOT and your DOT is locked away, essentially not doing anything besides earning 12 to 15%, that's great. But if you can do the same thing but get a liquid token that you can then go and lend or mint a stablecoin with, of course, that's highly beneficial to anyone using these liquid staking products.
And I think just to add on to that, where you're making a decision between staking and going into DeFi, folks, we're choosing DeFi and not securing the network first. This allows you to go secure the network and then participate in DeFi, which is a huge added benefit.
Yeah, so what's really great about liquid staking is you have effectively, one token in the market that has really gained liquidity across, Ethereum, and it's gained liquidity across even starting to go in other to EVM compatible chains. But one of the points that you all brought up or touched on slightly was that certain risks are introduced into the ecosystem because of that effectively stranglehold of one player in the market. Both researchers from Justin Drake to even Vitalik Buterin have advocated saying, hey, well, there actually needs to be a threshold where if that threshold is reached, that liquid staking product should actually raise fees until they get back below that threshold in terms of controlled ETH. In this situation, and I'm sure a liquid staking product is going to gain similarly very wide popularity because liquidity is really the key here. And so what do you guys think the key risks are within the liquid staking ecosystem today? And how can we reduce the worries and concerns that leaders throughout our space have really voiced?
Go ahead. I think the most natural thing here is to have good, healthy competition in the space. There's an entire market out there that can't access liquid staking right now. If you look at institutions, they see all of the counterparties in some of these more crypto-native liquid staking protocols, and they just simply can't access them for many reasons. The compliance and security standards are not high enough. They look at 40 node operators and they just see 40 different counterparties, and they're super worried about counterparty risk. So it's giving them a solution where they're a bit more comfortable interfacing against, and so that's Alluvial is building that standard. So I think that when we bring in this extra capital, we're going to see that the best way to confront this is just straight competition.
I mean, there's two problems too. There's protocol security and then the user of these liquid staking protocols assets. And so like if you run your own validator on a proof of stake network, you're trusting the network. If you delegate tokens to a validator, you're trusting the network and the validator. Now you're adding another application that you have to trust. And Lido, for example, we run validators on Lido, so we're not like being critical about them for no reason. But there's a risk associated with now the governance token holders controlling the ownership of your asset. And then also you have like depegging risk. You have smart contract risk just in general. But then that's from the end user perspective. But then for the network, you have large concentration of ownership of the network through a DAO, which will likely be like most of these liquid staking protocols, and the value of that token being a tenth of the value of like the liquid staking position. So I mean, theoretically, you could buy 51% of Lido tokens and then own 10x the amount of that ETH, which effectively right now controls 30% of the network. So like competition, to your point, is like totally true, but then it faces its own problems of liquidity, because then all these tokens are going to have different security guarantees based on the validator set. So all these tokens will theoretically be different prices. So having some sort of curve sort of product at scale for like a lot of these liquid staking tokens is definitely like the next thing that we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, I can just add on to that. So one team that's building on our platform called Tapio is kind of trying to solve this problem of fragmented liquidity. So even on Polkadot now, which is just about 4 months into Polkadot's kind of launch, we've got 4 different liquid staking products and then 3 different liquid crowd loan products, which is very Polkadot specific, but 7 or 8 different derivatives that are out there now. And this team is building a protocol to essentially create like a curve pool, but instead of an LP position, minting a synthetic token called T-Dot. This is basically combining all the liquidity of these different derivatives into one token that can then be used to lend and borrow on money markets or use elsewhere. So already starting to see this kind of pop up. And then on the risk side, I'll just add one thing. Because we've been working I guess, so focused on our stablecoin. One thing we've realized over the past month is that people are now starting to look under the hood of stablecoins much more now that the recent events have happened. And I think the same thing applies to liquid staking. As more and more liquid staking protocols come out, I think people need to have just a focus on just looking under the hood as far as how these liquid staking protocols work, how decentralized or centralized they are, before putting a lot of money and trust in them, because I'm sure we'll see varying levels of security audits and decentralization in these different offerings.
Yeah, and so it seems like competition will effectively, help solve some of these issues that occur right now with, a handful of players or really a couple or one player controlling such a large portion of the market. And you had mentioned, which I thought was very interesting, there's a whole swath of the market of potential ETH holders who can't even access the liquid staking market today. And you're likely referring to institutions who have to abide by certain rules of having their capital effectively commingled with other capital that needs to go through some KYC AML process. So how do you envision, and this is for everyone of course, the institutional market actually entering the liquid staking space, and what type of solution will solve some of those concerns that they have?
Absolutely. So, mature businesses, as you mentioned, are just held to a different standard, and they have to know their counterparties. And so, what we're going to have is a KYC process with our integrators, who are participants in the protocol, who will KYC as well as onboard and create on-ramps into the protocol. And so, this makes it super easy for this crowd that's maybe a little less savvy to gain access to liquid staking very easily.
I think it's also just like creating different entry points for people. I mean, like even folks in this room, I guarantee like most people are not running their own ETH validator, unless you are. This would be the exact room where most people would be running a validator, which means like your mom or your dad or your sister are not going to be doing it either. And institutions are looking at it in the same way. And like the liquid part is making this space more accessible, not just for institutions, but for a lot more other people. But it is separating where the entry point is at the stack, to where like liquid probably isn't the last thing that will be separating ETH from the yield from the user. But it is the next step into making it more accessible.
And just to add on to that, I think it's a great point, is, we just want to build a primitive that other builders can build on top of, right? You're seeing great projects, yield stripping products, fixed income type products, where they're actually trying to put a fixed rate term structure on top of liquid tokens. So very interesting ecosystem that will develop on top of this. But I look at it as, but previously when you went to stake, you would have to enter a staking transaction. It's not like the simplest thing to do. If you can just simply buy a token to stake, that's going to be the easiest way to get folks to stake.
And obviously we live, there are many successful blockchain networks at this point. Liquid staking products are typically built first on one particular blockchain, but they now need to consider how do you move that liquid staking product, to other blockchain networks. Do you think that's an area of growth that is still largely untapped? I know that many are starting to move their liquid staking products over to, for example, I know Lido is moving into Polygon to have it, but how do you think that area of the market will develop? Or do you think that the liquid staking products for individual chains are really just going to focus on continuing to improve their product on that respective chain?
Yeah, so I think it's a really important piece that we do want to have a multi-chain solution, but we feel it's very important to preserve the native aspects of that. And so we want to partner with builders on those chains to do that. And so we want to preserve that. I think it's really important. But we also know that there's this standard that needs to be met, right? So we're going to mesh that together. Native builders with an institutional standard to give access to those builders to capital they might not otherwise see.
Absolutely. I'll have like a negative example for some smaller chains, but One of the risk associated with liquid staking is that you're removing any sort of slashing punishment from the ownership of the network that you have. So anything under like sub $100 million market cap, it becomes pretty cheap to fork the network, and actually like virtually risk-free if you can sell the asset but still like own the validator that's staked to you. Larger networks like Polkadot, Solana, Polygon, obviously you're getting in the billions of dollars of like having to do something like that. But I don't think the idea of liquid staking should be universal for every single network, unless you're like fully looking at like the security mechanism of the chain. Like Cosmos, for example, we validate a lot of Cosmos chains. It'd be pretty easy to take over a chain in that ecosystem.
Now, liquid staking, a lot of these coins that are current have liquid staking products. One of the reasons why they're so popular is the alternatives is they're locked. You don't have any access to that liquidity. That won't always be the case. There's times in the future when those coins will be liquid. How does that change the liquid staking ecosystem? Does that effectively make that whole entire business model moot? Will there need to be some sort of evolution that takes place? Especially considering that event might happen within a 1-year time period.
Yeah, so I think the merge, right, there's two events. There's the merge and then withdrawals being enabled. The merge will be a huge catalyst because then transaction fees will go from the miners to stakers. So we'll see that staking yield increase. And then with withdrawals, you won't just have a one-sided market. And so you'll have this two-sided market where market makers can actually convert the ARB and keep the peg, right? And so we'll see that play out.
Awesome. Looks like I'm being told we're time, so thank you all so much, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.